World War II was not simply a larger sequel to World War I. It was a global breakdown of politics, empire, ideology, and security. From 1939 to 1945, nearly every major power and much of the world's population became tied to one enormous conflict. The fighting stretched across Europe, North Africa, the Atlantic, China, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. It involved armies, navies, air forces, factories, farms, scientists, and civilians. By the end, an estimated 60 to 75 million people were dead. Some died in battle, but millions more died through bombing, starvation, disease, massacres, occupation policies, forced labor, and genocide. To understand the war, the key is to see how several regional crises merged into one global catastrophe. The causes of World War II were rooted in the unfinished business of World War I. The peace settlement after 1918 left many nations dissatisfied, especially Germany, where defeat, reparations, territorial losses, and political instability created deep resentment. Economic crisis made the situation worse. The Great Depression weakened faith in democratic governments and made extremist promises more appealing. Fascist movements presented themselves as disciplined, national, and strong, but they also glorified violence, hierarchy, and expansion. In Germany, Adolf Hitler turned national humiliation into a program of rearmament, conquest, and racial ideology. In Japan, military leaders argued that expansion across Asia was necessary for resources, security, and status. The world did not suddenly fall into war, it moved there through years of ignored warnings. Long before Germany invaded Poland, the international order was already failing. In 1931, Japan seized Manchuria, proving that aggression could succeed if other powers were unwilling to act decisively. In 1937, Japan's war in China expanded into a brutal conflict with mass civilian suffering. In Europe, the Spanish Civil War became a violent preview of the ideological battles to come, with fascist and anti-fascist forces testing weapons, tactics, and propaganda. Hitler's Germany rearmed, remilitarized the Rhineland, annexed Austria, and then pressured Czechoslovakia over the Sudetenland. Britain and France often chose appeasement, hoping concessions would preserve peace. But each successful gamble encouraged the next. Aggressive states learned that treaties were weak when no one was prepared to enforce them. The war in Europe officially began on September 1, 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. The attack used speed, coordination, air power, and armored forces to overwhelm Polish defenses. Britain and France declared war on Germany, but they could not save Poland quickly enough. Then the situation became even darker. In mid-September, the Soviet Union invaded from the east under the secret terms of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression agreement between Hitler and Stalin that divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. Poland was partitioned between two dictatorships. This early phase showed that the war was not just a clash between countries, but a struggle over the future of Europe itself, borders, sovereignty, ideology, and survival. In 1940, Germany's victories came with shocking speed. Denmark and Norway fell. Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands were overrun. France, one of Europe's major military powers, collapsed in June after German forces bypassed expectations and drove through weak points in Allied planning. The fall of France transformed the war. Germany now dominated much of Western Europe, while fascist Italy entered on the Axis side. Britain stood almost alone in the West, protected by the English Channel but exposed to air attack and blockade. The Battle of Britain became a fight for control of the skies, while the Blitz brought bombing to British cities. At sea, the Battle of the Atlantic became a struggle over supplies, shipping, and Britain's ability to keep fighting. The conflict soon spread across the Mediterranean, North Africa, the Balkans, East Africa, and the Middle East. These were not side stories, they were connected to supply routes, oil, colonies, and imperial power. The Suez Canal, the Mediterranean sea lanes, and access to resources mattered enormously. Italy tried to expand its influence, but German support was often needed when Italian campaigns struggled. Axis forces defeated Yugoslavia and Greece in 1941, extending their reach across southeastern Europe. At first, this made the Axis appear unstoppable. But expansion also created pressure. Every conquered region needed troops, fuel, occupation authorities, and transport. The Axis powers could seize territory quickly, but holding and supplying it across multiple fronts became increasingly difficult. The largest front opened in June 1941, when Germany invaded the Soviet Union. Hitler expected a rapid collapse, but Operation Barbarossa became a vast war of distance, weather, industry, and endurance. German forces advanced deep into Soviet territory, but they failed to destroy the Soviet state before winter. The Eastern Front became the decisive land battlefield in Europe and one of the most brutal theaters in human history. It was shaped not only by military strategy, but by Nazi racial ideology. Occupation brought mass executions, starvation policies, forced labor, and the murder of civilians and prisoners. The Soviet Union suffered catastrophic losses, yet it relocated industry, mobilized huge armies, and continued fighting. Germany had begun a war it could not easily finish. In December 1941, the war became fully global. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii and struck American and British territories across Asia and the Pacific. Japanese leaders hoped to cripple U.S. naval power long enough to secure a vast empire rich in resources such as oil, rubber, and minerals. At first, Japan advanced rapidly through Southeast Asia, coastal China, and Pacific Islands. But success created a strategic problem. The larger Japan's empire became, the more ocean, shipping, and territory it had to defend. The United States entered the war with enormous industrial capacity, and the balance began to shift. In June 1942, the Battle of Midway severely damaged Japan's carrier strength and halted its offensive momentum in the Central Pacific. By early 1943, the Axis powers were losing the initiative. In North Africa, Allied victories removed the Axis threat to Egypt and opened the way toward Italy. In the Soviet Union, Stalingrad became a turning point. German forces were trapped in brutal urban combat, surrounded, and forced to surrender. The defeat destroyed the myth that Germany could not be beaten and marked the beginning of a long retreat in the East. In July 1943, Allied forces invaded Italy, and Mussolini's fascist regime fell. Fighting in Italy continued, but politically the damage was done. The Axis could still resist fiercely, but it was no longer dictating the war's direction. The Allies were now applying pressure from multiple sides at once. The Allied strategy depended on coordination across enormous distances. In the East, Soviet forces pushed German armies back through occupied territory towards Central Europe. In the West, Britain, the United States, Canada, and other Allied forces prepared to return to France. On June 6, 1944, the Normandy landings opened a major Western front. D-Day did not end the war immediately, but it forced Germany into a crushing two-front struggle while also facing bombing, shortages, and declining manpower. In the Pacific, the United States advanced island by island, capturing positions that cut Japanese defenses apart and brought Allied air and naval power closer to Japan itself. The Axis powers were being compressed. Their room to maneuver was disappearing. World War II cannot be understood only through battles and leaders. Its human cost was central to what made it different. Civilians were bombed, displaced, starved, deported, and forced into labor. Occupied societies lived under surveillance, rationing, collaboration, resistance, and terror. The Holocaust was the systematic murder of 6 million Jews by Nazi Germany and its collaborators, alongside the persecution and killing of Roma people, disabled people, Slavs, political opponents, and others targeted by Nazi ideology. In Asia, Japanese occupation brought massacres, forced labor, and severe suffering to millions. The war erased the boundary between front line and home front. Entire populations became targets, resources, or victims in systems built for total war. The war in Europe ended through the invasion of Germany from east and west. Soviet forces reached Berlin, Hitler died by suicide, and Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 8, 1945. But the war in Asia continued. Japan's military position was desperate, yet surrender remained politically and psychologically difficult. In August, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing vast numbers of civilians and revealing a terrifying new weapon. At nearly the same time, the Soviet Union invaded Japanese-occupied Manchuria, destroying Japan's remaining hopes of using Moscow as a mediator. Japan announced surrender on August 15 and signed the formal surrender document on September 2, 1945. The fighting was over, but the world had permanently changed. After 1945, the consequences of World War II reshaped international relations. Germany, Austria, Japan, and Korea were occupied. German and Japanese leaders were tried for war crimes, establishing new expectations about accountability for state violence. The United Nations was created to encourage cooperation and prevent another global conflict, with China, France, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States becoming permanent members of the Security Council. Europe's old empires were weakened, accelerating decolonization across Asia and Africa. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as rival superpowers, setting the stage for the Cold War. World War II ended one era and created another, leaving lessons about aggression, ideology, technology, and the price of ignoring danger until it becomes unstoppable. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.